From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Amarachi Ubani.
Tonight, Lagos Judicial Panel of Inquiry visits the Lekki Toll Plaza and Military Hospital on day 2 of its sitting. Management of Lekki Concession Company vows to release footage of all that transpired on October 20. Inspector General of Police tours police and other facilities destroyed by rampaging youths in the FCT, urges police personnel to defend themselves when in danger. Nigerian Customs Service says 6 persons suspected to be involved in the attack on its training command in the FCT arrested. And at least 12 people killed, several others missing after a 7.0 magnitude earthquake hit the Aegean Sea, causing damage in both Greece and Turkey. Plus business, sports and more later from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, President Buhari holds video conference with European Council President, seeks Europe's support for Okonjo-Iweala's appointment as the next Director General of the World Trade Organization and debt relief for Africa.
On sports news tonight, Juventus FC forward Cristiano Ronaldo recovers from COVID-19 after 19 days in self-isolation.
We begin in Lagos as the Judicial Panel of Inquiry for Restitution for Victims of SARS and related abuses continues its investigation. The management of the Lekki Concession Company says it is ready to release the footage of all that transpired at the Lekki Toll Plaza on October 20. The company's counsel, Mr. Agboluaje, made this pledge when he appeared before the panel today. Mr. Agboluaje and the company's managing director, Mr. Yomi Omomuwason, were invited by the panel to give their accounts on the events on that day. The panel later visited the Lekki Toll Plaza as well as the military hospital in Falomo for an on-the-spot assessment. Our correspondent, Victoria Idowu, reports.
It's day 2 of the Lagos Judicial Panel sitting. The members resume a few minutes to 11 in the morning with the Lekki shooting top on its agenda. The panel had summoned the managing director of Lekki Concession Company, Yomi Omomuwason, to give evidence.
We'll be happy if we are given some time to retain the services of an external counsel and come properly before the tribunal. We got a very short tease, and what we could lay our hands on, we did everything within our possible best to retrieve it.
It is imperative that we must move faster than we are actually moving at the moment. The program for today on the part of the panel is to visit the locus. I'm sure that will in no way affect your request or application to have a counsel. We would only visit the locus, take note of what we see at the locus, and proceedings will be subsequent to the visit.
Meanwhile, an NGO had earlier filed a petition with the panel asking that the investigation should include some of the alleged fake news and those who circulated it after the shooting. On the to-do list is also a visit to the Lekki Toll Plaza by the panel.
This is the toll area.
Mr. Omomuwason leads the team on a tour of the facility, showing the damage done on the property, indicating that a CCTV camera located on the mast remains intact.
Yes, I can. Okay, so that's the camera. Is it functional?
That's the camera in the footage we supply.
Yes.
Up to the point where the damage did not occur. Around, we'll see, because I've not had enough time to But if there's a network today, that camera will work.
He also gives the assurance that the footage from the night of the shooting is available. The panel also finds scattered around the toll gate area bullet shells, 5 in total. Next, the panel pays an unscheduled visit to the military hospital at Falomo in the Ikoyi area of Lagos State. For about 30 minutes, the panel members, journalists and everyone else were denied access to the facility by the military personnel.
We are waiting for them to grant us access to inspect the mortuary.
After some consultation amongst themselves, the team is led into the premises. And into this building, which is supposed to be the hospital, but as you can see, is an uncompleted facility.
We are going to the accident and emergency department. We are not interested in it. We'll go to the morgue. So the accident and emergency, let's go to the morgue. Okay.
Moving to the building, which is supposed to be the morgue.
This is the morgue.
We discover it's under renovation. They say the premises has not been in use since October 2019.
So sir, are we saying that the bodies that were here were transferred out?
October last year, she? This hospital is not operating. Can we go now, please? If this hospital is operating, please.
Thank you very much.
The panel continues its sitting on Saturday, October the 31st, 2020. Victoria Edo, Channels Television News.
In neighboring Ogun State, the Judicial Panel of Inquiry set up to investigate complaints and petitions of victims of police brutality and human rights abuses by security operatives in the state says it has received 20 petitions within 2 weeks of its inauguration. The chairman of the panel, retired Justice Solomon Olugbemi, said this after a meeting with the panel members in Abeokuta, the state capital. He explains that the inaugural sitting of the panel would hold on November 5th, 2020, and gave the assurance that it will be transparent to all those who will approach the panel. Justice Olugbemi asked more members of the public who have complaints to send in the petitions to the panel. Meanwhile, the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, has faulted the report by human rights body Amnesty International over the use of force by security operatives during the End SARS protests. In a statement by the force spokesperson, the IGP says that not only did police officers act professionally and exercised commendable restraint, some even paid the supreme price for peace during the recent protests and ensuing violence in some parts of the country. The IGP describes the Amnesty report that police personnel shot at peaceful protesters as untrue, misleading, and contrary to all available empirical evidence. He also notes that during the protests, officers of the force used legitimate means to ensure that the protests were carried out in a peaceful manner and in most cases physically protected and walked side by side with the protesters. In the words of the IGP, available reports show that 22 police personnel were extrajudicially killed by some rampaging protesters and scores injured during the protests. Many of the injured personnel are in life-threatening conditions at the hospitals. 205 police stations and formations, including other critical private and public infrastructure, were also damaged by section of the protesters. It also begs the imagination that Amnesty International failed to mention or pay tribute to police officers who were gruesomely murdered during the protests while serving their fatherland. Police officers are also human beings equally entitled to the protection of their fundamental rights to life and dignity of human person. While noting that the force is committed to the federal government's ongoing holistic reforms of the police force, the IGP enjoins Amnesty International to ensure they subject their reports to adequate scrutiny and proper verification of facts before making the reports public. The police boss has also been inspecting police facilities in the FCT destroyed by the EndSARS, following the EndSARS protests. Accompanied by the Director General of the National Youth Service Corps, Brigadier General Shuaibu Ibrahim, IGP Adamu also inspected the NYSC orientation camp in Kubwa, which was also looted by Rampaging residents. According to him, 53 persons have been arrested in connection with the looting, which occurred on Tuesday, October 27th.
The tale of woes that trailed the EndSARS protests as the police hierarchy counts their losses. The Inspector General of Police is received at the FCT command as he begins an assessment of the damage done to police facilities in the nation's capital. According to the FCT Police Command, 10 officers died during the violence, while 196 persons were arrested for the attacks on police facilities.
This series of events led to the tragic loss of about 10 lives, several persons with various degrees of injuries. Some vehicles and properties set ablaze, while others were vandalized. The most devastating of these activities was the malicious burning of Dus Amakaranta police outpost.
While applauding the officers for their resilience during the protests and its aftermath, the IGP encourages the officers to be assertive while discharging their duties.
We'll encourage you to be professional in performing your duties. We'll encourage you to be civic. But if anybody touches you, if anybody comes to assault you, you can also protect yourselves. When we talk of human rights, the police are human. So the rights of police officers will also be protected. So we are sending the message that legally we have the right to protect ourselves. But while we're doing that, we'll make sure that until we are in danger.
From the command, the team proceeds to the force headquarters, where the police boss sets up a committee with a mandate to assess and report within 3 weeks the level of vandalization done to police posts and facilities across the country.
The terms of reference of the committee are 1. To physically visit the scenes and capture the pictorials of all damages done to police infrastructure and personnel. 2. Establish the weapons holding that were lost during the incident. 3. Verify the fatalities suffered by the police. 4. Undertake visit to the families of the deceased police officers and those injured. 5. Give the cost implication of the losses in terms of facilities, weaponry, and other assets in custody of the Nigeria police. And 6. Provide suggestions on possible interventions towards reconstruction, rekeeping, and requisite support for the families of the deceased and the injured. It should be made clear that the assignment of the committee is not a witch hunt venture. It is rather a stock-taking exercise that is intended to properly document the losses of the Nigeria police force for the purpose of strategic planning. The outcome of the exercise should be an authentic and verifiable reference document for our reconstruction and equipping plan.
He also visited the NYSC orientation camp in Kubwa, which also came under attack last week Tuesday. And according to him, 53 persons have been arrested following the incident. The IGP plans to visit other facilities in other parts of the country.
In part 2, after the break, we stay with the aftermath of the EndSARS protests as more states take stock of the losses incurred following damage to property. Join us again. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Lagos Judicial Panel of Inquiries visits the Lekki Toll Plaza and Military Hospital on day 2 of its sitting. Management of Lekki Concession Company vows to release footage of all that transpired on October 20. Inspector General of Police tours police and other facilities destroyed by rapaging youths in the FCT, urges police personnel to defend themselves when in danger. Nigerian Customs Service says 6 persons suspected to be involved in the attack on its training command in the FCT arrested, and at least 19 people, more expected, killed, and several others missing after a 7.0 magnitude earthquake hit the Asian Sea, causing damage in both Greece and Turkey. As the hunt for looters continues, the Nigerian Customs Service says 6 persons have been arrested over the attack on its training facility situated in Gwagwalada, the Federal Capital Territory. Just last week, rapaging youths and their numbers attacked government facilities in the FCT in search of COVID-19 palliatives. The commandant of the college, Mr. Adewale Adeniyi, told journalists after a tour of the training college that those arrested have been handed over to the Nigerian police for further investigation.
The past 1 week has seen businesses and government organizations counting their losses over attacks by rampaging youth. One of the facilities that came under attack is a warehouse where palliatives were stored in Gwagwalada. The warehouse borders the training command of the Nigerian Customs Service, and that was not spared during the attack. The commandant of the college narrates how youth numbering over 4,000 insisted on looting the facility.
It will not be conclusive for me to draw such conclusions yet, but we are certain that those who came to us were hoodlums, because we managed to convince them that we didn't have anything here. But I agree with you that those who came may be drawing some kind of inspiration and encouragement from the successes they have recorded in some other places, not just in customs locations, but in other facilities owned by the federal government of Nigeria.
The training command is back to normal as the commandant leads officers and journalists to see the impact of the damage on the facility. Shattered glass and bullet holes were some of the destruction caused by the rampaging youth.
Clearly, when people come to your fence, if you are demonstrating or you are protesting, and you come and dig holes on the fence or create this kind of damage, this is a clear violation of our space. This is no longer protest. We treated this as people who came with the intention to steal, with the intention to harm us. And we have students here, we have staff here. We could not allow them to come and violate our security, so we had to respond appropriately.
While investigations are on, officers of the Nigerian Customs Service are calling on Nigerians to desist from acts capable of breaching peace.
The Cross River State government says it is devastated over the wanton destruction of the state's archival materials dating back decades in the wake of the EndSARS protests. The State Commissioner for Information and Orientation, Asu Okang, says some of the items lost may never be recovered. Meanwhile, the state government has condemned looting of the World Health Organization's office and other health facilities in the state.
Just when you think you've seen enough of the devastation in Cross River State following the EndSARS protest, then come these sites. This is what is left of the state government's printing press, where printing machines worth millions of naira were vandalized and set ablaze. In another section of the building, archival materials, gazettes and other historical documents are in ruins.
2 months of your stay in office.
The State's Commissioner for Information and Orientation, Mr. Asu Okang, in company of management staff from the ministry, is in shock over the level of damage.
It is very unfortunate, it is saddening, it is sickening. What has been lost here may never be recovered. Never. never be recovered. I am most saddened by the fact that the entire archival materials, the institutional memory of chronicle of the state is completely gone. Anybody with the useful information, please get to us. We will fish them out.
Also destroyed is the Nigerian Chronicles, which is said to be the oldest surviving newspaper organization in Cross River State, and the Nigerian Television Authority, Calabar.
So sad. People who call themselves protesters, whereas I call them vandals, criminals, came, and that is the picture of what I have today. It's now history, because you can't put it back. To get these machines today is running into billions of naira, so we can't get it again, so that brought it back.
In a related development, the Cross River State government has condemned similar attacks on the office of the World Health Organization in Calabar, the state's essential drug store, COVID-19 reference laboratory, infectious disease hospital, and other health facilities in the state.
There is no single bed. In the IDH, there is no bed. In some of the primary health care facilities that was raided, there is no bed, no equipment, and all of that.
While the state government continues to carry out investigations on how the looting began, it's calling on those involved in the looting of both public and private properties to return the items in their possession or face the law when caught.
In Taraba State, the government has vowed not to spare anyone involved in the looting of government and private property in the state, except if returned to the nearest authority. The state deputy governor, Haruna Manu, says every looted item must be returned, as the looting has gone beyond COVID-19 palliatives to pilfering. A 100-bed space isolation center, NYSC orientation camp, as well as the Bioresource Center were all vandalized by looters in Jalingo. In the meantime, the Taraba State government has inaugurated an 11-man task force committee to recover all looted items, as well as assessing the level of damage done.
Following the looting spree that greeted warehouses, government organizations, as well as private schools in Taraba State, the Deputy Governor embarks on an on-the-spot assessment of the facilities. His first port of call is the Bioresource Center, a federal agency that trains youths in various skills. The state NYSC orientation camp, which houses a COVID-19 isolation center, is not spared. The intervention of the army stopped the rampaging youths from vandalizing the entire facility.
Around 11:14 p.m., some hoodlums came in, thousands, with cutlass, hoe. Some were holding guns, and a lot of vehicles. We even have some of the plate number with us. Came in, they packed all our machines, they packed all our chairs, they vandalized everything in this center.
So they vandalized almost everything. They packed our mattresses, packed all the beds in the isolation center, removed the ceiling fans, the khaki uniforms, the boots, the canvas, the PT uniform, all the cooking utensils, including freezers, office furnitures, almost virtually everything.
Baffled by the incident, the State Deputy Governor Haruna Manu warns of dire consequences if the stolen properties are not returned.
I want to use this medium to still call upon those that looted these properties to return them, because if they don't, government will descend on them, and then will descend on them heavily. I want to assure them. So it is in their best interest, those that carted away these properties, they should return them.
Recovery from this is a huge task, and the Speaker of the State House of Assembly is promising to support the government as it works out plans to help deal with the situation.
There will be a collaboration between the state assemblies and the National Assembly, perhaps maybe the Conference of Speakers and the National Assembly, to see how we come up with a law that will tackle these kind of issues.
No fewer than 15 government and private facilities were vandalized in the wake of the looting following the NSAS protests in Taraba State.
Meanwhile, the presidency has been shedding light on part of what transpired during the virtual meeting between President Muhammadu Buhari and former heads of state in the aftermath of the EndSARS protests. In a piece titled Inside PMBs Palais with Former Heads of State, presidential spokesman Femi Additional gives some insight into who said what at the meeting held on October 23rd. He states that President Buhari had briefed that the protest, which began as legitimate protests against police brutality, codenamed EndSARS, was hijacked and misdirected by hidden hostile hands who wanted to destabilize the country. In his opening remarks, General Gowan said the matter was of great concern to him and is quoted to have said, "I wish the youth had stood down after their initial requests had been granted by government." Next was former President Olusegun Obasanjo, who Mr. Additional says was frank but affable and no tension was discerned in his remarks, which were equally concurred with the hijacking narrative and reasoned part. On the job and economic situation in the country, the interventions being made were good, but not far-reaching enough for a population of 200 million people. His Additional's piece states that General Ibrahim Babangida condoled with the families of those who died in the protests and riots, but expressed concern for the quality of intelligence available to the security agencies. Chief Ernest Shunekong was said to have been brief with his contributions, simply saying preventive actions were to be considered for the future rather than curative, concluding, "Please call us for more of these meetings. We need to frequently discuss very important national issues." Key elements of General Abdulsalami Abubakar's perspective was that funding of security agencies should also be looked into, while the media should be adequately engaged. Dr. Goodluck Jonathan submitted that the root cause of the crisis had been with us far before the advent of the current administration, and that it may last into future governments except some immediate steps are taken. Governor Umaru Fintiri of Adamawa State has reviewed the 24-hour curfew he imposed on the state. The curfew will now be from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., beginning from today, October 30, 2020. The governor made this known in a broadcast to citizens of the state after his tour of affected facilities and observed that relative calm is returning to the state. Governor Fintiri therefore commended the conduct of citizens who have remained law-abiding in spite of the extreme difficulties they had to endure as a result of measures taken to restore normalcy.
Let me commend our citizens generally for their compliance with the curfew and sincerely appreciate those who were misled into participating in the loot, pillage and plunder of our common patrimony, for seeing reason in returning the looted items. So far, over 50% of the looted items have been recovered, among which are 86 tractors out of the 110, and more are being surrendered. It is not in the character of our citizens to break the law, neither are we known for involvement in brigandage. This is partly why there has been a tremendous response in the voluntary return of the valuable items that were carted away.
Here in Lagos, the government has announced a further relaxation of the curfew imposed on the state. The government in a statement says the curfew will now be from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu praises Lagosians for observing the curfew, which is expected to restore normalcy in the state, and asks Lagosians to go about their businesses in peace, even as they shun actions that can threaten the state's unity. When the news at 10 returns, more stories on the aftermath of the EndSARS protest, plus President Buhari holds video conference with European Council President over Okonjo-Iweala's appointment as next WTO Director General. That's on Business News. Join us again. Welcome back. Now to some positive news from the southeast, where governors in that region appear to have reached an agreement to commence an implementation plan of the 10-point demand articulated by the youth organization MASOB. After the meeting, the chairman, Southeast Governors Forum, says to foster lasting peace and development in the region, And in the future, the youth must patiently address their grievances.
Extensive dialogue. We interacted with a number of youth organizations in Southeast. The communique of Mazov in our meeting with them is quite informing, and I'm happy that our leaders at the federal level are here. The ones our federal leaders will address immediately, they will. The ones the governors will address, they will immediately. And I'm sure sometimes in December, working with all the committees, we are going to set up to work on these demands. Mr. President General will be able to lead the select youth and some leaders to meet with Mr. President. I think that there is nothing here I demanded that are not, a way forward for lasting peace in Southeast in our nation.
After the meeting, the leaders visited some of the vandalized sites in the state to assess the level of destruction. In Rivers State, Governor Nyesom Wike says billions of naira will be required to fix the damage caused by the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra in Oyigbo local government area after their face-off with security agents that led to the loss of lives and destruction of property. The governor, who says he's determined to ensure IPOB does not carry out its activities in the state again, was speaking when members of the Rivers State Caucus in the National Assembly paid him a solidarity visit in Port Harcourt.
This morning we are going to spend, what was it budgeted for? Did we think of that? For you to go and spend, somebody to make you to go and spend about 3 billion naira again, they brought down the courts, brought down all the police stations there, killed 6 soldiers and burnt some of them, killed police officers, and somebody will say you should allow such organization simply because you don't know what tomorrow will be. What will tomorrow be? And somebody begin to come to annex our state to change the name of Oyibo to say it is Obibo. That cannot be when I'm governor of the state. When I leave, when anybody who comes says we allow them to come and annex part of your state. We have lived well with Igbos, no doubt about that. We have lived well with the Hausas, no doubt about that. We have lived well with Yorubas. We have lived well with all other ethnic groups. But you cannot, because we live with everybody, then you take the laws into your hand to destroy us. No, we cannot allow that.
One of the fallouts of the NSAS protests is the frequent engagements of the youths by the government to dialogue and address some of the concerns raised during the protests. One of such concerns is the high rate of unemployment that has bedeviled Nigerian youth over the years, despite the quantum of human and natural resources that abound in the country. To address this issue, a call has once again gone out to the federal government for urgent resuscitation of the moribund Warri Port, Delta State, South Nigeria, to help curb unemployment in the state and in the nation. A town hall meeting comes as Delta State also begins to look at ways to rebuild lost infrastructure from looting in the aftermath of the protests.
The Delta State Caucus in the House of Representatives on a tour of the vandalized properties in the state, the aftermath of the NSAS protest. The team, led by Minority Leader Mr. Ndudi Elumelu, empathized with the state government. They assessed the level of destruction carried out by angry youths, especially at the State High Court in Asaba, headquarters of the Federal Road Safety Corps and the Coca Leisure Park. To help the state with its recovery plans, the federal lawmakers make a donation.
Under the 2021 budget that we're bringing under our Zenab Intervention Fund, that we're providing 150 million to support the rehabilitation of this high court.
Leaders
Meanwhile, the governor reaffirms his commitment to partner youths in the state to improve good governance and create a platform for them to engage in viable discussions.
Listen to our complaints and pick it one after the other.
The result of his commitment is this town hall meeting with the youths to dialogue and address some of the concerns raised during the protest. Lamenting the current state of ports in the state, especially the Warri Port, Governor Okowa calls on the federal government to resuscitate it as a way to create employment for the youths.
Congestion now has become a major problem and a huge problem. And our economy is not working the way it ought to work. Because the ports that did exist, along with Lagos and even Port Harcourt, they allowed them to begin to die a gradual death. And that was what happened to the Warri Port. Warri Port, obviously, the channels also needed to be dredged. Over several years, they ignored it because they did not want it to thrive as a port. Yes, this current government did award a contract for the dredging. That's the phase 1 of the dredging. But until they dredge the phase 2, we will not have achieved that problem, the problem that does exist.
As the Delta State government takes steps to engage the youths, address their demands, rebuild vandalized structures, replacing losses is also a priority task which will be carried out as those found to be culpable are brought to justice.
Some politics now. The candidate of the People's Democratic Party in the October 10th governorship election, Mr. Eyitayo Jegede, has approached the election tribunal to challenge the outcome of the poll in Edo State. The spokesperson of his campaign organization, Benga Akimoyo, told Channels Television in Akure, the state capital, that they are hopeful that the party will get justice at the tribunal. The incumbent governor, Oluwarotimi Akeredolu of the All Progressives Congress, was declared winner of the election declared by the Independent National Electoral Commission. And in Anambra State, Governor Willie Obiano has undertaken a tour of 3 riverine local government areas to ascertain the flood level in the areas, touring on a Navy gunboat with naval officers and officials of the State Emergency Management Agency, SEMA. The governor sailed through to Anambra East, Anambra West, and Ogbaru, where unpleasant sights greeted them. Houses and farmlands are all underwater, and the impact of the flood is evident in some buildings, as several of them have collapsed. Rounding off the tour of the 3 local government areas, the governor announced the floods have started receding and called for the people in the areas to go back, saying the people in the areas will soon go back to their homes and they must be supported to find their feet again.
We've been on the River Niger for the 4.5 hours, touring the stretch to Anambra East and West and Ogbaru. It's a very good experience. The good news is that when compared to the flood last month and this month, the flood has receded by about a foot, which is good news. But the challenge is we have a lot of people in our IDP camps and people that are staying at home, people that have been displaced by this flood. They need to be rehabilitated. We have suffered many mishaps this year. The COVID was a major blow. Just surviving the recovery from the COVID, these guys were chased away from their farmlands by the flood. You know, I have the last time I visited the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, I did request for a major assistance to rehabilitate these farmers.
The military says troops have killed 35 suspected terrorists in Borno State within the last 1 week. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, the coordinator of the Defense Media Operations, Major General John Enenche, said the military, in conjunction with other security agencies across the country, is recording significant success. General Enenche says that the operations have led to the neutralization of armed bandits, arrest of suspected bandits and their collaborators, the rescue of kidnapped victims and recoveries of rustled cattle, as well as large cache of arms and ammunition. The Edo State governorship election petition tribunal sitting in Benin City, the Edo State capital, is adjourned till December 7th for pre-hearing in the petitions filed following the Independent National Electoral Commission INEC's declaration of Governor Godwin Obaseki winner in the September 19 governorship election. Following the inaugural speech of the tribunal's chairman, Justice Abdulrazak Abdul Karim, where he pledged the tribunal's commitment to complete its task within the scheduled time frame without bias and sought counsel cooperation, the tribunal heard 5 applications from all 5 petitioners' counsels. The applications, which came by motion ex parte, sought the tribunal's leave to effect service by substituted means on some of the respondents, in particular Governor Godwin Obaseki, and where applicable, as in the petition of the Allied People's Movement, Mr. Philip Schreiber, Deputy Governor of Edo State. The tribunal granted leave for the Action Democratic Party, ADP, and a second petitioner, Tracy Agol, for substituted service of the petition and accompanying processes on Governor Godwin Obaseki by pasting on the premises of the People's Democratic Party Secretariat on 1st East Circular Road, Benin City. 2 other petitioners, Allied People's Movement and Action People's Party, were granted leave to effect substituted service by handing the documents over to any staff or member of the PDP at its Edo State Secretariat on 1st East Circular Road in Benin City. The 5th petitioners, Action Alliance, and another were granted leave to serve by substituted means through pasting same at the Edo State Government House Complex, Dennis Osadebe Avenue, Benin City. Let's get some business news now. Here's Teniola Shibuwale.
Thanks a lot, Amarachi. Welcome to Business News. President Muhammadu Buhari has stepped up his campaign for former Finance Minister Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala to become the next Director General of the World Trade Organization by seeking the support of the EU. In a virtual meeting held with the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, both leaders also discussed issues bordering on debt relief for Africa, EU-African relations, as well as recharge of the Lake Chad. On its part, the European Council reaffirmed its support for Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's bid to become the first African and female Director General of the WTO, despite opposition from the United States, which maintains that the organization is in dire need of reform, which must be driven by a trade expert. President Buhari thanked the European Council for its support for Nigeria's candidate and expressed appreciation to Mr. Michel for expected positive developments on the issues discussed. Meanwhile, the campaign strategy team for Nigeria's candidates for the post of Director General of the World Trade Organization has held an emergency virtual meeting aimed at securing Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's appointment as the next head of the WTO. The meeting, which was called by the Minister of State and the chairperson of the campaign strategy team, Ambassador Miriam Katagum, seeks to review and strategize on the way forward in the light of recent developments in the selection process for the appointment of Director General of the WTO. Recently, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had said Nigeria will continue to engage relevant stakeholders to ensure the emergence of Nigeria's candidate as the next Director General of the WTO. Nigeria is currently reaching out to all members of the WTO, including the United States and South Korea, in a bid to overcome and arrive at a consensus to adopting the panel's recommendation of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala as its next Director General. To other stories now, lower oil prices have cut into Seplat Petroleum's revenues for the first 9 months of 2020 by 21.65% to 135.62 billion naira, down from 151.87 billion naira reported in the same period last year. According to its unaudited financial statement sent to the Nigerian Stock Exchange, the dual-listed energy company's gross profit fell by 65.8% to 31.68 billion naira. Operating profit dipped by 138% to 27.74 billion naira, while profit before tax plunged to 170.4% to 45.48 billion naira within the 9 period this year. Meanwhile, the company said its gas business is set to play a major part in its operations, while it expects the share of revenues from long-term gas contracts to increase as edge in its oil business due to weak price on the international market. After resuming from the Muslim holiday, the stock market ends October with a 571 billion naira additional increase in total value of listed equities, consolidating earlier gains this week with 43 gainers and 11 losers. Chimeze Obi Wagu tells us more.
Thanks, Tenny, and welcome to the Stock Market Report. It's a sweet way to end the month as the bull affirms itself in the market. The all-share index crossed the 30,000 psychological level today, up almost 4%. And when you look at the week-to-date change, the index was up 6.4%. The earnings season is in full force, and the results released so far have been quite impressive. So investors are really positioning themselves for the full-year results. And don't forget, the low-yield environment in the fixed income market is still driving their sentiment towards equities. The drivers of the index today were the big boys: Dangote Cement, Boa Cement, Nestle, and MTN Nigeria. Take a look at the sectors, all of them in the green. The consumer goods and the industrial goods sectors seem to be on steroids. There was heavy activity in the market, a lot of bargain hunting. Look at this. Almost 11 billion naira. That was the amount realized today from the sale of over 807 million shares. Can you beat that? And here are the contributors of the volume and value, the banks. So far, only Stanbic IBTC has released its results in that sector, and it was very impressive. That explains the reason investors are scrambling for stocks from that sector. While the curtain closes positively for October, optimism is still high that the month of November will open bullish, with the hope that short-term risk takers won't jump into profit-taking next week. For now, it's kudos to the bull. And that was the Stock Market Report. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu.
Thanks a lot, Chimeze. On the other hand, it's mostly negative close for major stock markets across the globe, with U.S. markets posting its worst 1 week since March this year, led by losses from tech stocks. Well, here are some of the closing numbers for the day. And that's Business News Tonight. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Back to you, Amarachi.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thanks a lot, Teniola. At least 19 people have been killed after a 7.0 magnitude earthquake struck off Turkey's Aegean coast and north of the Greek island of Samos, destroying homes. And much of the damage in Turkey occurred in the city of Izmir, which has 3 million residents and filled with high-rise apartment blocks. In Greece, 2 teenagers were killed on the island of Samos when a building collapsed on top of them. Simon Pusey has more international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. The southern French city of Nice has paid tribute to the 3 people stabbed to death in a suspected jihadist attack at a church. A minute's silence was followed by the placing of a makeshift memorial outside the Notre Dame Basilica. People laid wreaths of flowers and lit candles to remember the victims. French President Emmanuel Macron said Thursday's stabbings were an Islamist terrorist attack. He has also held an emergency meeting with senior ministers. Security has been stepped up at places of worship and schools across France, following 2 similar attacks within 2 weeks. A powerful earthquake has struck off Turkey's Aegean coast north of the Greek island of Samos. This mobile phone footage shows a building collapsing in Turkey's Izmir province, while here you can see CCTV footage showing an office being shaken by the large tremor. The 7-magnitude quake was felt as far away as Athens and Istanbul. Turkey and Greece both sit on fault lines and earthquakes are common. The USA is on course for its highest electoral turnout rate in more than a century. More than 81 million people have already voted early in this year's election, either by post or in person. In Texas, 8.5 million people have voted, which is approaching the total turnout for the state in 2016. California is next, where over 8.4 million people have already voted, while Florida has had more than 7.3 million early voters so far.
If I can get better, anybody can get better, and I got better.
Campaigning in Florida, Donald Trump says his rival wanted to lock people down.
Donald Trump refuses to listen to science.
While Joe Biden criticized what he called the president's super spreader events.
Donald Trump just had a super spreader event here again. They're spending more than just coronavirus. He's spreading division and discord. We need a president who's going to bring us together, not pull us apart.
This election is a choice between my plan to deliver historic, and you know what this is going to be, right? Historic. This is historic prosperity. Another major tax cut to go along with the biggest tax cut in the history of our country. And record job growth. And Joe Biden's plan is to deliver punishing lockdowns. He's going to lock you down.
New Zealand has voted to legalize euthanasia in what campaigners have called a victory for compassion and kindness.
65.2%.
Preliminary results show 65.2% of voters supported the End of Life Choice Act coming into force as a new law. The law will allow terminally ill people with less than 6 months to live the opportunity to choose assisted dying if approved by 2 doctors. Its opponents say the law lacks adequate safeguards. The referendum is binding and the law is expected to come into effect in November of next year. At least 140 migrants bound for Europe have drowned after a boat carrying around 200 people sank off the coast of Senegal. That's according to the UN.
We get a lot of tragic stories, and I just wanted to flag one that really caught our eye, sadly, this morning.
A spokesperson for the Secretary General of the United Nations announced the news at a press conference. The boat is thought to have caught fire and capsized shortly after leaving the town of Umbour. About 60 people were rescued, according to reports. And finally, a NASA probe sent to collect rock from an asteroid several hundred million kilometers from Earth is back on track after some technical concerns.
Touchdown declared.
The space agency says the rock samples have been safely sealed and the probe is ready to return to Earth. It's after officials behind the OSIRIS-REx probe, which landed on Bennu earlier this week, were worried after a rock wedged open the door of a container. This meant that samples were spilling out from the craft. The spacecraft launched in 2016 and will begin its journey back to Earth next March. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel's studios in Lagos.
The Confederation of African Football CAF has announced that its president, Ahmad Ahmad, has tested positive for COVID-19. CAF says the 60-year-old Madagascar football administrator who presented mild flu symptoms after arriving in Cairo on Wednesday will now self-isolate for at least 14 days. The African Football Governing Body adds that people who have come into contact with Mr. Ahmad over the past 7 days have been informed and are requested to take the necessary measures. Meanwhile, CAF has announced that the final of the 2019-20 Champions League will hold on November the 27th at the Borg Al Arab Stadium in Alexandria of Egypt. CAF also announced that the semi-final second leg game between Zamalek of Egypt and Raja Casablanca of Morocco has been rescheduled for November the 4th at the Cairo International Stadium. And that's a wrap on sports news. I'm Ayotunde Balogun. Back to you, Marachi.
Thanks, Ayotunde. And the main news again. The Lagos Judicial Panel of Inquiry today visited the Lekki Toll Plaza and Military Hospital on day 2 of its sitting, as the management of Lekki Concession Company vowed to release footage of all that transpired on October 20 during the EndSARS protests. That's the news at 10 tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Good night. Stay safe.